The lesson.
Oh, yeah.
Z-Trip.
Yeah, man.
Tis a pleasure, man. Now, as I guess someone like yourself who's been doing this for quite a while, I guess in a nutshell, just take us back to the very start, as in where you're from, how old you were when you got into DJing, and how you got into it. Who were some of your main influences?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me is I started, before anything, I started doing graffiti. That was my and playing, I played drums as a kid. So I was really into drums, drummers, Led Zeppelin, John Bonham, Buddy Rich, incredible rock drummers, funk drummers as well. But the thing is, in doing graffiti, I would sit and do these pieces. And I remember turning on the radio in New York and hearing Mr. Magic and Marley Marl doing their show on WBLS, and then Red Alert doing his show on Kiss FM. And it was happening every weekend, and they were competing time slots from 9 to 12. So I was hearing all this music I'd never heard before, and I was hearing these DJs mixing it up and scratching it up, and I was like losing my mind, going like, this is incredible. So it quickly turned from me doing these pieces and doing graffiti really to like, the graffiti just became sort of secondary. Now I was really just listening to music and sort of drawing, as opposed to before I was just drawing and sort of music was in the background. So it really, the shift happened there, and that was probably my big inspiration, was Marley and Red Alert, hearing those guys play and mix these records. And so I would tape, back in the day, it was cassettes. You'd have to have 2 cassettes going at the same time in separate parts of the house. And you had to make sure that you flip them in time, because one might be a 30-minute, one might be a 60-minute. So you had to and you also had to make sure you had fresh tapes, because you didn't want to record over other previous shows, because there'd be some exclusive. All of a sudden, Rakim would show up and do a freestyle, and you're like, yo, did you hear from his freestyle? Like, no, I got a tape of it. Like, it was that. There was no way to, people were just trading tapes. So I would take these cassettes, and I would go down to the record stores. I'd be like, hey, what is this song? And they'd be like, oh, it's this. And they'd point it out to me, and I would started buying all these records that I was hearing them play, so I could get the extended versions and the acapellas and the things. And I was basically, my record collection was growing because I was hearing all this stuff and being completely influenced by it. I never really set out to be a DJ. It was really just about collecting the music. And once I realized I had, 3 crates worth of 12 inches, I started to go like, okay, I got to figure out, I want to emulate what I'm hearing. I want to play these things. I want to scratch. I want to learn how. So I got the gear and figured it all out. And it's like I never set out to be a DJ. It was just really the love of wanting to mix this music together and emulate the things I was hearing and try different, here's the thing that was also interesting is all that music was very hip hop funk based, but very rarely would you hear rock or any other music influence. You'd hear it, but it just wasn't a lot. It wasn't as much as you'd hear James Brown or Sly and the Family Stone or, whatever. So I grew up listening to these rock records because my brother he's an older brother. He turned me on to AC/DC and Deep Purple and all these rock bands. And I started hearing the drums. There's this common thread between just big, huge drums and rapping. And it's like, when you hear Run DMC's first record, it's just big drums and them rapping. And I was like, well, rock drums do that. So it's like I started digging for weird rock records and things like that to see if I could get the same energy and power that I was hearing from these hip hop records. And that's where I started to realize, oh wow, there's a lot of this cross pollination that's going on, with not just that, but with jazz and with everything. So the collector in me started, it just all started, puzzle pieces started coming together. You know what I mean? And that was at that point I was like, okay, this is I don't know what, probably 87, 88 at that point, where I was like, I want to do this. I was going to school for art and ended up stopping. I didn't do that anymore because the DJing was really starting to take off. It was kind of funny. Like you would, as a graffiti writer back in the day, you would go and spend money or rack up cans of paint and go run outside and paint something and dodge the cops or whatever. And you're basically, for me, I was paying money to do this. I was spending what little I had to get this art on the wall because I had to get it out of my system. But I remember one day I got chased by the cops. I had to lay in the bushes for, I don't know, it was like 8 hours or something, right? Just laying there while cops were going around and just And it was that moment I was like, I have a DJ gig coming up where I'm going to make $50 and I'm laying in the bushes. And like, so it's like, clearly one of these needs to be the one that I need to pursue. And yeah, so DJing just it sort of took over. It became like this is what I'm going to do. And, you know, $50 turned into $100, turned into $500, turned into $1,000, and turned into me opening for all these bands that were coming in town, and, you know, putting out music, and just everything excelled. But it was never really, I never really set out to do it. It just all sort of came together. You know?
Organically.
Yeah.
So tell us, you got the turntables, you're buying the records, you've obviously started playing a few parties, a few gigs. At which point do you distinctly remember, like, was it a particular event that you were like, yeah, this is definitely what I want to do? Yeah,
I mean, well, the thing is, it's funny because there was also a really interesting time for me. My parents were divorced. I got a divorce. And so we'd moved to Phoenix, Arizona from New York. And so then my dad moved back to New York. So I was basically going back between Southwest United States, basically the desert, you know, very close to Mexico, and then going back to New York. And so these records that I was finding in New York were regional records that you couldn't really get anywhere else. And I'd take these records and I'd bring them back to Arizona and play them for people. So people were hearing these crazy independent hip hop records and just, you know, things they've never heard before, they would never hear. And so I got to be this guy who was sort of bringing this music to people. And it really was like house parties. I remember one house party. It was somewhere around the time. It wasn't necessarily one house party that made me go like, this is what I want to do. But it was around that time of, you know, people saying, hey man, bring your record collection over to our party. And, you know, they'd invite me to the party, but it was really because I had the killer collection and they just wanted to hear me play those records. When I realized that was happening, I was like, all right, let's do that. And then I was like, well, my parties are cracking, and I know they're cracking because I'm playing this music and people will come in to see me do this. So I'm going to start charging them, like, you know, hey, man, you should make a cover charge and I should make X amount of dollars, whatever, just trying to hustle. Really, it was just to get more money to buy more records. Really, that was it. But there was, there was kind of that moment there where it's kind of funny. Speaking of that time, there's one in particular where I remember it was a girl who was in my school. I was like my senior year in high school or junior year or whatever. And she was like hot, popular, right? She's like, hey, come and play my party. You really want you to play the party? I was like, cool. I was like, yeah, it'll be X amount of bucks or whatever it was. Like, I don't know, $50, whatever the fuck. And she's like, yeah, no problem. I was like, stoked. The hot chick is asking me to DJ her party. It's going to be cracking. And it was. And I remember I sat up there, and it was me and a couple other dudes I would roll with. And I was like, oh, hey, man, I got to go grab something out of the car. And I ran to the car and came back. And the guy who was like her brother or something was at the door. And he wouldn't let me back in unless I paid. So I had to pull out $5 and pay the guy just because my song was running out and I had to get back. And then I ended up not getting paid that night. So I actually paid to play. So it was like there were moments back then. But when I recognized that there was a desire for people to see this and that I could turn this into something. It started. That was kind of the moment where I was like, yeah, I don't need to do any more of this. I was making pizzas and doing whatever bullshit job you do. But once I started doing that and making mixtapes and spreading it around and I DJ'd my high school prom when I was in high school. So it was like the satisfaction of being in a school that you weren't really stoked to be in because it's school. And you just want to get out, but knowing that they're paying me to DJ this thing is kind of, when you get a check from the school, you know what I mean? And you're going to that school, a light bulb goes off and you're like, wow, I could do this. I could really figure out how to do this, right? And I think it was kind of around sort of high school where I was like, yeah, this is happening. And I took any DJ gig I could, man, weddings, whatever, it didn't matter. I just wanted to be DJing, period. And, I think that's why I was successful with it, because I just wanted to play these records. Money really was just about getting more records, like I said.
The lesson. Oh yeah.